That's a new feature. I didn't do that. All right, so you're on, and there is one attendee, Ardeen Harris, in the attendee room.
Is she in the room?
And Mike Caranta, I'm going to bring him in.
Arlene Harris is watching or listening.
Yes, and the mayor was in the attendee room, so I brought him in. You can either unmute or.
And is our treasurer here?
No, I don't see her yet.
I am here, Kim. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. We'll call this meeting to order. It's a city budget workshop, also a first reading of ordinance 533. We'll have a roll call. Present now is Councilperson Souter, Councilperson Smith, Councilperson Leary, Councilperson Day, City Administrator Bill Barthel, Kathy Walls, and Kathy Warwick, and Mike Carranza, the mayor, and myself, Michael Platt, as president. We're going to kind of skip around the agenda tonight. We're going to read the ordinance first. The trust has asked them for a variance on the farm. So do I have a motion for the first reading of ordinance number 533?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, first reading. Ordinance 533. An ordinance to amend section 230-15 of the city code to permit expansion of the existing farmhouse structure on Penn Farm number 6, property tax parcel 21-09.00-002 for the use as a farm office, business office, administrative office, archive storage, boardroom, meeting room for the trustees of the Newcastle Common, and to expand other permitted uses of Penn's Farm. Whereas Penn's Farm number 6 property tax parcel 21-09.00-002, the Penn Farm, comprised of approximately 110 acres of land, which a farmhouse structure in poor condition, a barn structure, and other related outside building designed for agriculture use. And whereas Penn Farm is owned by the trustees of the Newcastle Common, the trustees, and whereas the Penn Farm is the only property in the city of Newcastle currently zoned AH, agriculture and horticulture, as defined by section 230-15 of the zoning code. And whereas the structure permitted on AH, agriculture and horticulture zone land are limited by section 230-15 of the zoning code to one family dwelling per 100 acres, accessory structures appropriate to support agriculture or horticulture use, and one roadside or highway retail stand for the sale of farm produce. And whereas the trust proposed to improve, renovate, and expand the existing farmhouse at the Penn Farm, so to provide offices, meeting rooms, and boardrooms for the trustees' use in the managing the farm and other operations. And whereas the trustees further desire to use existing barn structures located on Penn Farm for the purpose of permitting meetings, events, fundraisers, weddings, party, and other public and private gathering. And whereas the trust further seeks the right to use the roadside stand for food preparation and sale. Now, therefore, be it ordained by City Council, the Council of the City of Newcastle as follows. Section 1, Section 230-15B, 1B, 1B, and 4 is hereby amended to add the following sentence at the end of each subsection. The roadside stand may also be used for food preparation and sales. Section 2, Section 230-15 is hereby amended to add this new subsection C as follows. Notwithstanding any in this section that is to the contrary, the following use are permitted as a matter of right of the property owner known as Penn Farm number 6, tax parcel 21-00.00-002 also known as Frenchtown Road, Newcastle, Delaware. The existing structure on Penn Farm 6 may be expanded to no more than 5,000 square feet and may be used as farm office, business office, administrative office, archive stores, boardroom, meeting room, for the use of the trustees of the Newcastle Common as owners of the property, and for private and public gatherings as authorized by the trustees of the Newcastle Common, otherwise permissible by applicable law. The barn existing on Penn Farm number 6, as of date this ordinance may be used as a barn and authorized by the trustees of the Newcastle Common for meetings, events, fundraiser, weddings, and other public and private gatherings. Section 3. If any of the subsections, sentence clauses, or phrases in this ordinance is for any reason to be unconstitutional or invalid, such decision will not affect the validity of the remaining portions of the ordinance. Section 4. In the event any existing ordinance or part ordinance are in conflict herewith, the provision of this ordinance shall control. This ordinance shall become effective immediately upon passing. First reading, May 27th, 2021. Since we're going to go through the budget tonight, if we have any questions, we can do that, but there's also going to be 2 more readings, and it's going to be brought up at a council meeting. So if we can just kind of take the first reading and then jump into the budget, if that's okay with everybody else.
Yeah,
Okay,
Mr. Barthel, would you like to highlight the budget tonight?
yes, thank you,
Wait a
Mr.
minute, before we, oh, Mike, I'm sorry, Michael,
Yes.
can I say a few words about
Sure.
budget and planning? We had that discussion a little bit in our last meeting, and we have seen budget as the same as planning, and really it's nothing like planning. It is about keeping the lights going, keeping the patrol cars rolling, and doing the best we can. And just to give you an example, I did manage a $5 million operation, and each year we asked the divisions to give us their funding requests, which they did. And in actuality, we had very little flexibility like we do here. If a historian left, maybe I could hire a law enforcement officer. But most of our budget was, it was about 90% and more of personal services, of people. So we were tied up, just like we are here in the budget, unless there's something really big that comes up. And so what I did every year, we would have a meeting and we would decide what our priorities within the organization were. What was the top priority? We get maintenance there, we have law enforcement, visitor services, all these folks. Okay, what are the top priorities for us to do within the resources that we have? Not to go out and get new resources. It's not always about money. It's about how we use our time. It's about how the staff uses their time. And in our comprehensive plan, there is a recommendation that there be a workshop that develops an annual planning process for the city to achieve the goals in the comprehensive plan. That's why we have a comprehensive plan. And that's the same thing. How are we going to use the resources in our care to achieve the goals that we have, like climate change, like other things? So I'm trying to say that there is a difference between the budget, a big difference between budget and planning, goal setting. So I'm just suggesting we get through this, we balance the budget, we do the best we can, we move around money where we can, but then we have a goal setting workshop for the comprehensive plan, which would have to be an open process, and see how we attack the bigger issues in the city and not just keep the lights on. So I just offer that as a thought. And so thank you for listening.
Just to piggyback on Councilperson Smith, under chapter 14 in the comprehensive plan, the draft version we have, since I understand it's not yet back with the governor's signature. Is that correct, Mr. Barthel?
That's my
Yeah.
understanding.
Okay,
Correct.
so it talks in here about the planning commission, the city council, the mayor, the city administrator, and city staff hold a joint comprehensive plan implementation strategy workshop. And that's right in our plan. So to go along with what Councilperson Smith said, I think that's something that we should set up once we get the budget settled and have a workshop on that. There are several goals in the plan here that we should try at least to work towards, or at least prioritize of when they can be addressed. So, thank you.
And something I agree with what you're saying, but you have to take into consideration, our budget, yes, we do have to forecast, we do have to plan ahead, there's no doubt about it. But this budget process, since I've been here, is the administrator and staff who pretty much deal with the daily operations of the city, presents it to us at the best of their best knowledge. And it's our job, like Mr. Smith said, to move money around, whether to approve it, not to approve it. And that's, I think, is our function. So we do that. And then also with planning, every month we are giving a treasurer's report. Do we question it? Do we look at it? Do we go for it? That's kind of my goal is we shouldn't these meetings shouldn't just stop here. They should continue on. I mean, there's not a lot of people that question Miss Carlin, and maybe there's no reason to question her, but that's the way I look at it. This, I agree. This is not just a May, June process. It should be a full year process.
Right. So we should probably, again, set up a date and time for a workshop for council and others to meet and talk. So.
Right. Well, I think we have to come up with an agenda first because, like I said, I asked staff to have the budget out last week just so that we could all go over it. We all have a working knowledge of it. We all should be prepared to ask questions or already submitted questions just so that we are on top of this. And I feel the same way about the workshop. So we can look into that. That's not a problem.
Yeah, so that's important for guidance.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Again, I'm asking you to divorce money from the planning process. Don't think of it
Right,
as money.
Mr. Smith, I totally agree with you.
And, like it talks about transportation in the comp plan. We're not asking how many millions could we put into transportation. We're just saying, okay, we've got a transportation study. Who's working on that? That's all I'm asking. Identify work and identify people who are doing it. Who are the people and at what time are going to accomplish the goals in our comp plan? Not asking for any money, not looking at the budget or finance. It's already there. How are we going to spend what we have? The resources in terms of people primarily.
Suzanne Souter, I agree with what everybody has said so far, but except that I don't see how you can totally divorce planning from budget, because most things called for in the plan cost money. And we can't plan how to spend our money. I mean, we have to plan how to spend our money, excuse me. And there are, as you said, there are a lot of basics that just have to be covered, and there's not a lot of discretion. This year, I agree. Obviously, we need to pass a budget by the end of next month. But I would hope that for next year, we could do this planning meeting before the budget process starts, so that it could help shape the budget process instead of following after the budget process.
Like you said, we have very little discretionary funding. So that's why I'm not insisting we have the planning process before the budget, because we don't have a lot of discretionary. When we try to eke out $20,000 to take care of some very special needs, then we don't have extra money to do that. And the planning process, part of that, in looking at the comp plan, is saying in the next 10 years, how are we going to find the money to do X? How are we going to find the money to do Y? That's part of the planning and the implementation process for the comp plan. Because in some cases, it will take big chunks of money. But if we did that today and then had the budget meeting next week, where are we going to find the money? We have very little discretionary.
We don't
So
have
let's-
time to do that now. I'm not suggesting that we halt the budget process to do the planning first. It's too late for that this year. But I'm just saying for
I
the future.
agree. I think we should stay focused. I mean, tonight's first run through the budget, ask the question, see where we're at. Mr. Smith, totally agree with what you said. Don't walk away. I'm still talking. No, so, Mr. Berthel, would you like to continue?
Yeah, Mr. Platt, if everybody's done, I assume council is. Yes, thanks. Well, what I'd like to do, and maybe some of this might have some more relevance based on the comments that were just made. What I'd like to do is, and you all got a couple of graphs that we received a couple of graphs that we dropped off. And what I'd like to do is just kind of give a little bit of a historical perspective on personnel costs and annual budgets in general from 2013. So Kim, if you can put up the personnel graph to start, please. All right, thanks. The point I want to make here is that from a personnel perspective, as you can see from 2013, our costs have remained pretty steady. And I believe that's because we've created economies and other efficiencies. We've become way more efficient than we were prior to 2013. And I believe that there are other ways to continue upon improving upon efficiency. And I think, again, maybe I'll say this a few times tonight, but I think this goes to Mr. Smith's point. You know, how can we generate more funds? And we've always said, how can we generate more funds? Well, you really have a limited way of doing that. It's either through you raise taxes, we go to the state, we work with the trustees. But from our perspective, we're always looking for efficiencies and for economies. So the point also that I'm making is that, yeah, budgets are a one-year projection, but in the long term, obviously, they're an accumulation of years, and they do matter in terms of the types of things that council wants to accomplish. So Kim, if you could put up the next graph, the annual budgets. And so again, if you look at here at our annual budgets from 2013, you can see that in 2017 or since 2017, the budgets have gone up pretty significantly. And a lot of that has to do with the infrastructure the money we've been spending on roads, projects. I mean, Delaware Street, and others, we just did, whatever, $2.3 million worth of road projects for Delaware Street. But in general, our operating budgets have remained pretty consistent. And again, it's our job to see what we can do to become efficient, to provide the types of things, streets, infrastructure, those types of things, and do it as in an efficient way as we can. But again, the point that I'm making here is, so yeah, you've got significant projects that you have on your table right now, and I'll get to that in a second. You talk about the municipal complex, burying underground wires, those types of things, electrical vehicle stations, those types of things. But I think what you need to do is look at infrastructure projects and road projects more on a long-term basis. So we may in 2013 or 14, we weren't spending as much on infrastructure as we are in 20 or 2021 or perhaps 2022. I think we were still spending a decent amount on infrastructure, but the point is, I think you need to look at it over a 10-year horizon. So I just wanted to share with you guys that perspective. And then if there aren't any questions, I'll just move on, Mr. Platt.
Go ahead and continue.
Oh, the mayor has his hand raised, I guess.
Okay, he does. I can't see.
Actually, I appreciate that. Actually, no, I was going to make a comment about the other conversation, but we've moved on. But maybe at some point I'll come back to it. But I appreciate it. And I think a lot of good ideas. Served on planning, chaired planning. Obviously, was on council and in this role. So I think, and I think the whole range of ideas. And I think Mr. Platt, I think you're embracing it. It's a good idea. That we kind of think about some of the aspirational issues in the big picture and get that sorted out, and then kind of hit the budget next year. I think that's kind of a more logical way to go about this. So anyway, I like it. And I think Russ, good points. So anyway, thanks for indulging me.
Okay, again, unless there are any other questions, so the budget we have in front of you is a balanced budget at $5,424,340. As I just pretty much alluded to, obviously, our budget is a 12-month financial blueprint of projected expenses and revenues, as you pretty much all know. Now, with a combination of the expenses and revenues from this year, okay, we're able to project into next year that we will have approximately 8.5 months of reserves for operations. Those of you who've been doing budgets, well, the majority of you know that we strive to have we strive to have 6 months of reserves for our operations. Okay, as I just said, what we're able to do right now is say, again, it's a projection that we think we'll be able to project up to about 8.5 months of reserves going into this year. Now, in our second year of COVID, obviously, we're not nearly as pessimistic as we were last year at this time, but we are taking the approach that creating reserves, being able to create these reserves, protects us in case we experience a shortfall in revenue. Last year, we planned on a shortfall and budgeted that way. This year, you've all seen the budget. We're basically budgeting with the idea that we anticipate getting the revenues we expect, but shouldn't, and so we budgeted that way, but shouldn't we have the reserves, we think we have the reserves to protect that. Now, long-term, I will tell you this, the concern we have is basically twofold. One, we're concerned that housing is going to slow down and we may have a housing bubble at some point. And it may not be this year, it may not be next year, but I think in some time, you're going to see that those revenues we received this year, which were highly accelerated, revenues we didn't anticipate. But like I said, I think housing's either going to go back to the way it normally was, or it will worsen than it normally is. The other concern we have, probably more than housing, is inflation. I mean, everybody can see what's going on with inflation right now. If you're building something or doing some work in your home, lumber, everything is exceedingly high. We're concerned about the cost. We have a projection for road construction in our budget, and I'll get to that. But we're concerned that those materials may go up higher before we have a chance to get to it. But I think generally speaking, we're concerned about those two items. Now, should we continue to meet our normal revenue projections and keep expenses in line? What we have here is, I think, to Mr. Smith's point, and I know Ms. Souter, you had talked about this a couple of years ago when we were in more normal times. How do we have these reserves? And you had mentioned that, and it was, okay, do we increase taxes, that type of thing. Should we be fortunate enough to get the reserves the revenues we're anticipating, then you have the opportunity to take those additional reserves and say, okay, let's sit down and look at the projects we want to go after. Now, to the point of the projects that are in the comp plan, which is a municipal complex, you're already talking about that. Burying wires underground, you're already talking about that. Electrical vehicle stations, you're already talking about that. And I'm not saying you shouldn't get together and have those discussions. I'm simply saying that if things work out, you now have some seed money. I would say, based on past budgets and from my experience from 2009, you've got some pretty extraordinary seed money if things work out. And you decide to go in and touch some of that if you decided to save it. Mrs. Leary, at one of the meetings, as far as the municipal complex was concerned, I think the first one, when we talked about that, your question was, well, how are we going to get the money for this? Great question. I mean, it was our embryo. We were just starting that process, but it is a process. And so here's an opportunity for you to look at some of those reserves and, as you said, decide where exactly you want to put them, if anywhere. Before I go on, any questions about anything I just said there? Okay, what I want to talk about next is profitability from COVID. I understand there's been some questions about whether or not we made profits from COVID. We have not. Okay, any of the expenses that we basically submitted to the county for reimbursement of expenses that we incurred. Now, I will tell you this. We did receive recently, I think it was in the middle of May, $264,860 from the county through the CARES Act for police salaries. So we were allotted just so much money. If you remember, I think it was 188,000 twice. And with what we had left, it was roughly $264,860. So we have received that money, and I had Dan do some research because, quite frankly, we weren't exactly sure how we could spend that money and on what. So our solicitor did look into it, and basically from the legislation that was done at the federal level, we could pretty much do whatever it is we want to do with that. Now, we had I had questions from Mr. Platt and from Ms. Souter that were submitted, and I'll get to those in a second. And one of those questions was, what's that additional $50,000 that's earmarked for the police station? Well, out of the $264,000, we're recommending, we've been working on that HVAC system forever. We have a quote from a contractor, and it's going to cost us about $50,000 to finally rectify that system, which has been an albatross since it was put into the building. Now, the other point I'm going to make is we have really not submitted anything else out of that $264,000. That will go into the reserve. My thought on that, however, is that money should be as much of that money as possible should be used for policing services. But again, that's all going into the reserve that we talked about.
So just to summarize, Mr. Barthel, at one point at a time, of the 264,860, setting aside 50,000 to fix the HVAC, and then of setting aside the remaining 214 plus thousand for police related items.
Correct. There are still other things that I've spoken to the chief about, and we'll get into more, like the car, should we be buying more cars, those types of things. But quite honestly, before we did this, we received the money, and it really wasn't until the other day that I realized exactly what we could spend it on. It was very much as a surprise that we had this money. And I wasn't going to, as I explained to the council president, I was not going to spend a dime of this money on something I didn't know we were allowed to spend it on, in the point that maybe 5 years or less, we'd have to give it back. So we did some research, and the research, again, from our solicitor, says that we can pretty much use it
Wherever.
as we choose.
Mr. Barthel, can you explain why that's all being kind of earmarked for the police department? I mean, I 100% support them, but I'm just.
Oh, it doesn't have to be. No, this is money that came in that you could pretty much, and that's why I said we put the rest of that into the overall reserve.
Okay.
I'm simply saying that a good portion of that can help us, because as you guys all know, I mean, a lot of the new cars we just bought 4 new cars. We've had a discussion about trying to make it so that every 4 or 5 years, the whole fleet is interchanged. Well, right now we're not there. So I may come back and say, all right, I recommend we look at 2 more police cars, and here's what we do. There is an issue, and buy two new cars, for example. There's an issue with the gutter system out there, and I talked to the chief about that. We talked about possibly needing to replace the roof. I don't know if we have to. So all I'm saying is it's money that came from salaries. We don't have to use it all for salaries or for the police department. I'm simply saying that would be my first preference. But again,
guess the
that's
best
something that
thing-
at the time that would be able to be discussed by council.
Right, I was gonna say, I guess the best thing to do in that situation is just put it in the reserves and have the discussions as they come up.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, leave that
I
money off
agree
the
with that.
table right now.
Yeah, well, and that's what we're doing.
Okay.
Those are going into the reserves.
Okay, go ahead and continue. please.
Okay, now, unless again, there are other questions, what I will tell you is this, what this budget, a highlight or a recap of what this budget actually contains. Okay, we put in $450,000 for road projects. The roads we've identified are Bryalgon, 13th from Moores to Bryalgon.
Hold on, I'm writing this down. Sorry. Bryalgon.
You know what, I can send this to you if you'd like, I can send the list to you.
Yeah,
Okay,
good
okay.
idea.
13th from Moores to Bryalgon, West 9th from Washington Street to its southerly terminus, which is Larkin Street, the alley off the 600 block of Cherry Street, and, excuse me, we're also hoping to maybe mill an overlay of Umbrella Row or / the 400 block of Gray Street, and address the 2 speed bumps out in Washington Park. Those are the items that we have out of that 450,000. We have $30,000 in catch basins, 25,000 in handicap ramps, 15,000 to continue the Wilmapco study, which is the second half of the cost to do that, 75,000 for capital reserves, in addition to the reserves that I mentioned initially. So we put another 75,000 in the capital reserves. And again, I'll point to, or to allude to Ms. Souter, which was something, again, I know that you wanted to do as 2 years ago. So we're saying we're still going to be able to fund some capital reserves with that, plus the money that I initially spoke of. We have created, I think, as most of you know, a relationship with Fleet Management, which has allowed us to, in this budget, we need to buy another truck for Public Works. We have a truck that's one of the plows that we're having trouble with, that's old, that absolutely needs to be replaced. It includes the 4 payments on the four new cars that were pretty much approved last fiscal year. The two electrical vehicles, the payments on the garbage truck and the street sweeper. And of course, there's other things in the budget that you all have seen, and that certainly will entertain any questions you might have, but those are kind of the highlights. Now, I will also just say this, and then I think, well, then I'll go to the questions that I received. We did receive requests for $38,000 from the various nonprofits, and we put $25,000 into our budget out of the request for 38. And I can certainly get into those specifics if you have questions on that. Mr. Platt, that's all I have, unless you will allow me to then address the questions, unless council has other questions right now, the questions that were written by Ms. Souter and by you.
Let's start with the questions that you received, then we can open it up.
Okay.
We may kill a couple birds. You know, we may all be thinking the same thing, so.
Okay. So Ms. Souter, her first question is public safety, page 3, building repairs go from 5,000 this fiscal year to 55. I think I addressed that. Well, I did address that. Second item, public safety, page 4, nothing budgeted for seasonal bike patrol. I know we reduced it last year due to COVID, but why nothing going forward? Will our new police officers cover the park? So I reached out to the chief, and I'm going to just read verbatim his response to me in an email, which was, quote, "We talked internally pre-pandemic about moving away from the seasonal program because of potential liability issues that exist with putting unarmed and minimally trained officers into service. Also, the standards that are in place to become a nationally accredited agency with a seasonal program are significantly hard to manage, illustrating the concern for increased liability. We had to change gears at the start of the pandemic, but as we work our way back to normalcy, we have been met with bigger issues. The liability concerns still exist, but in today's climate, with a steady barrage of anti-police rhetoric, we cannot in good faith expose seasonal officers to these conditions with minimal training." The chief goes on to say, "We are looking into funding that will create a specific overtime line for a 2-person bike patrol filled by our full-time officers. Patrolling Battery Park will be a part of that assignment." So if you have any questions in regard to that, certainly, I think that pretty much summarizes where he's at on seasonal patrol.
Agree with the chief on that one.
The next question was again, public services, page 9, a large increase for vehicle lease. Is this because we decided last year to convert to leased rather than purchased vehicles? Is the saving reflected in another category? I see that debt service is projected at the same amount as this year. I'm gonna ask Kathy to address that. You're muted.
Sorry. The vehicle lease actually did not increase, a large increase. It actually increased from this fiscal year from 21, but it actually is quite this, very similar to last year. What happened was, because we were going into this year's budget, we paid ahead the street sweeper and one of the dump trucks. And then we deferred the first payment on the trash truck, so that fiscal year 21 was very low, but that was an anomaly. We're now back up to paying the monthly 12 payments for the sweeper. We're paying the last annual bill for the one of the dump trucks. We'll start paying the annual bill for the new trash truck, and we'll include now the 2 electric vehicles that we have for Public Works. So that all adds up to I believe it was $102,000.
Right.
That's what happened with that line. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, Kathy. Thank you. I should have looked back to the prior year.
No problem.
Okay, the next question was, okay, Mayor and Council, page 10, nothing projected for economic development activities. Shouldn't we be promoting our downtown development district? The cities which have made the best use of this program actively promote it. So what I'll say to that is this: we have Linda Rashford, obviously the former council president, and Mr. Smith and I have been working with the folks from the DDD. We have worked with Rick Farrell, who's a budget consultant from the state. And I see no reason why we wouldn't, I would think we would continue to do that. I mean, if council wants to make a case for putting money into that, line item, certainly they can, but that's what we've been doing for the past, I don't know, Russ, a couple of years, right? Mr. Smith?
Pardon me? I'm sorry.
I said we've pretty much been doing that for the past couple of years.
Working with the DDD?
Yeah, no, I'm saying you and I and Linda have been working.
Oh,
with the
yeah.
DDD and Rick
Oh,
Farrell.
absolutely.
Right,
Absolutely.
Right.
I'm not
Sorry,
sure,
I was catching up on notes.
That's all right.
I'm not sure if this falls right here, but I mean, we have in the past had ads in AAA magazine and another magazine. I looked back through some notes real quick here, so I don't have exact all details, but I know one of the magazine's ad, it was 2,500 and the AAA magazine is 1,800. And I think certainly with reopening of everything and people eager to get out and about and with the museums, I think we might want to invest those funds as part of that. So, but maybe that falls under a different category.
No, I don't. If you're asking me, I think it would fall perhaps, like you say, under economic development, but that would be a discussion item for you and council to have. If
Okay.
and I think
So-
one of the magazines was out and about, if I'm not mistaken. But
Oh, no, I don't think it's out and about. It
No.
was AAA and it was let me,
okay,
while
and
we're
that's
talking, we'll go
travel.
through, but that's $4,300 right there. So that we might want to consider.
So just one.
I'll see if I can
question-
find the other magazine.
Okay.
Just one
Um,
question on the economic development line item. I see that in 2018, there was like a substantial amount of money that we spent. It was 29,000. Does anybody know off the top of their head actually where those expenditures went?
Mhm.
What was it for?
Bill, do you want to explain that or you want me to explain it?
I'm just curious.
So we set
Oh.
aside about $30,000 to try to, and Bill might be able to fill it in better, to try to get somebody on board here in the city to do PR and marketing for us. That person did some work with the SHIPS program, getting a variety of ships here in 2018, which actually also worked for us in 2019, although she didn't do that. And she was meant to come up, the person we hired was meant to come up with a plan for PR and marketing and do some of that. And basically what it came up, at least in my eyes, Bill, and you can correct this, was basically a job description for herself in the end.
I understand. It was it was really personnel costs is what we're looking at.
Basically,
And that's fine. I just
It was
wanted to.
it was a contractor.
Yep,
yeah.
yep. I got it.
We
Did I
tried some that
explain
didn't
it
work.
well? I may not have explained it well.
That
So-
was you nailed it.
so.
Okay, unless there are other questions regarding that, still under Ms. Souter's question, the last question is under revenue, page 22, the police pension supplement is projected at a much reduced amount. Is this because we anticipate a reduction in funds from the state? And I'm going to ask Kathy again to answer that question.
Yes, we budgeted a lesser amount because we received less last year. I'm not sure if it was because of COVID, but the state basically gave us less money. So we originally budgeted less. However, in the last couple of days, actually on May 25th, we received, we get 2 payments annually. And our first payment for this year was only 20 some thousand. That's why we budgeted the 47. However, the payment we just received was up to 56,000. So we're assuming we'll get another 56,000 unless the state changes in January of fiscal year 2022. But we didn't know that until it came in just yesterday or the day before.
So that 47.5 might actually be 102. Is that what I'm hearing? 50.
No, you'll get one more payment of 56, and then the last payment, which will be next May, will be their next fiscal year. So I have no idea if it will go up or down or stay. If
Okay.
it's all over the place.
All right.
And it's kind of a lagging indicator. You don't know until you're already in the budget process. So at the time when we chose the 47.5, it was based on the payments that we were going to get.
We had received to date.
Yeah, we only received half of it. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Okay, then those were the questions from Ms. Souter. When we have a number of questions from Mr. Platt. The first one is page 2, line 6170. And you're gonna have to actually look at your budget for this one. Line 6, okay, office supplies and equipment. I assume, Mr. Platt, you're questioning why 8449?
Yeah, why it went up and almost doubled?
Right, that's because of the COVID expense. So those are one of the items that we had, so we budgeted for again this year, we budgeted for last year, and that's been in your budget, those are the items that we've been.
Right, they're the ones that highlight, okay, I should pick that up. But we were
Okay.
reimbursed for that, correct?
Yeah, those are the things that we've been, we submitted for and have been reimbursed for.
Okay,
The next item on page 3, line 7400 to begin with, which is mandatory training.
we're only setting aside 600 where we spent 2,600 last year.
Wait a minute.
No, we're setting aside 2,000.
Right, oh, okay,
Yeah,
We
yeah,
only
we
spent
put aside
okay.
2,000. This year, we only spent 6 because the police were doing the majority. And again, Kath, correct me if I'm wrong, but the majority, I guess, of whatever they did was through Zoom. And so they were able, so we're now back asking the 2,000 again.
okay, and we're gonna stick with the 3,000 for the testing,
Yes,
okay?
Yeah.
And then you answered the building repair question.
correct. Okay, and then on
Have it,
page
yeah.
6, line 6120. Computer and software expense. Again, I assume you're asking about why the actual was where it was.
Correct.
And again, that was a COVID expense.
Okay,
The next item, page 10, you asked, line 7055.
meeting security.
Right, and that would be something you'd have to expound upon. I mean, your concerns about that.
I think we have to have a serious talk about that, whether we're gonna Zoom meetings before we get back into meeting in public, whether we're going to rent a place, whether we're gonna have to, I think we still have to continue, my understanding of the emergency order from the governor is that we still have to Zoom meetings, so there's an added expense to that. I mean, it's gonna be a decision we're gonna have to make down the road. I just want to throw it out there that I don't think $1,000 is enough.
And, okay, so to answer that question, when we sat down with the police, obviously, we weren't sure of how this whole thing was going to evolve. We didn't know how many actual meetings we would have. We put that number in there. We thought that might be good as a quote. I'll use the term placeholder.
Right.
But you make a good point. I mean, as to when we're gonna, when council's gonna decide that we're actually gonna go back into public meetings. But yes, as long as we're in a state of emergency, and I don't know that the governor will ever, the legislation or the governor will ever lift this requirement. But as long as we're in a state of emergency, we have to figure out a way to broadcast these meetings out to the public. But I think, if I may, I think that might be something that we might be more prepared to discuss at the June meeting.
Right.
Okay,
Well,
fair.
and Mr. Bartel and Mr. Platt, if we have to pay to broadcast it, that's not security. That would come under a different line item, wouldn't it?
Yes,
I'll
yes,
put
yes, yes,
everything in
Mr.
one
Pla-
ball.
Yeah, it absolutely would. Yeah, but the question was asked if we have to do that. I mean, but yes. And then the last thing on page 17, which is 8055.
Flipping, hold on. Okay,
Hold on, I'm sorry. Page 17, item, what did I say? 8055. Why am I not seeing that?
it's police liability, but I
Oh,
don't
okay,
think
yeah,
there's,
police liability, and the question was, do we have enough coverage? And the answer is yes. We do.
Okay, I
And
mean, 'cause
that's the
what-
premium. That's the premium for the coverage. In fact, I was on the phone today with our agent concerning that. And he felt, he convincingly confirmed that the coverage we have for those guys right now.
Even with the changes that are expected to come through the House and Senate in Dover this month? With the difference in policing?
Well, for what we have, he indicated to me that these numbers were good considering that. Now, there may be other options for police officers, which may include their own personal umbrella liability
Okay.
policy. But,
I carry that as a medic, my own personal, so.
right, but I'm just
And I
saying,
did as a federal employee as well, so.
right, I'm
Right.
just saying, no, I'm just
Yeah.
saying, because Mr. Platt's referring to the fact that there's, and you all probably know this, that the legislation, I believe, coming out of Washington is that police will be personally responsible for their actions. And the chance of a civil lawsuit will increase astronomically if that happens. And so that's what they're talking about. I mean, I can't say that's not an issue today or before these times, but certainly it wasn't on their radar, at least not in terms of the legislation that's being discussed. And we were
Correct.
told that the liability policy that we have for them is adequate, or is, I'll just say.
Sufficient, okay. No, I mean, if they change the qualified immunity, every time they pull Carter over, somebody can sue them. And I'm just making sure that everybody's prepared for that. Okay, that's all I have.
And Mr. Platt, that's all I have.
Okay, I have several questions. Some of my questions might be just reminders of what certain things is over the years. But on page 1, on the very first entry, I noticed a 80,000-ish difference in police salaries. Is that for the 2 additional guys? Goes from 882 to 962?
No, we've had increases in, no, it's not just for the 2 guys. It includes the 2 guys.
Okay.
But it's not just for the 2 guys.
So those are more personnel issues that we can't really mention here. Is that correct?
Do you want to know specifically who it is? I think.
No, I mean, we're giving.
I would suggest you don't discuss that now.
Okay, very good. No, I don't need to know specifics. I was just kind of wondering why it went up 80. So that's all. 80-ish. Because you've answered some questions while we're going along here. Page 2, security cameras citywide. I know that we've talked about putting cameras up, and obviously in this last year with COVID going on, we didn't really do anything. And I'm going to gather that we're planning on getting those cameras installed for 2022.
Correct.
With that there. Do you remember where they were going?
We have them. They're at the wharf. They're at 220 Delaware. We've got 3 at 220 Delaware, and then we've got 1 on Route 9. It's already installed. 1 on Route 9.
Oh.
They're already up. This is the money to monitor
Maintenance.
them.
Oh, that's the money to monitor. Okay.
Why
Thank
is there
you.
2 line items there? Is one for monitoring and one for new installs?
For security
Yeah,
cameras.
or is the next line item just not labeled?
Yeah,
Yeah, that
70, 80.
$10,000 you're talking about, Joe?
Yes.
Yeah, that's for body cameras.
Okay. I'm glad you said that, because I was going to bring that question up.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a new line item.
Gotcha. And I
Great
know
idea.
the state's requiring that.
Yeah, great idea. I thought we already had them.
Yep.
We need to get new ones.
Oh, okay. Okay, page 3 answered the question on building repairs. Answer page of question. All right, so there's a thing. Sorry, I didn't get to look at this when I was in California. I just, only was able to look at it in the last couple days. Page 6, reimbursable private property maintenance. Is that when we have to go out and mow the grass or paint or fix something, and then we get reimbursed when it gets sold or something?
Yes, that is when we have a third party do work for us, and then we pass that bill on, and it's also offset by the revenue on the other side, which is basically reimbursable
Okay.
property owner.
Temporary labor under this particular grouping, what's that for?
Kind of jumped ahead. I think we're in.
I'm sorry, we were
No, that's
reimbursables.
right. All right, public service. Yeah, temporary labor is what it pretty much has always been. The need for, if we need to bring people in because we have guys who are out, if we have a number of guys who are out that are sick, or guys that are injured, or we need extra guys to come in if we need help with snow removal, that kind of thing.
Okay, like I said, some of this is just a reminder of what things are.
Right.
Page 8. Down under pruning, planting trees, rows and parks. Now, that's not for in Battery Park. That's the tree commission money?
Correct.
Okay, all right. And below for contract maintenance, city properties, parks, that's Antonio's, correct?
No.
No.
Mm-mm. Kathy, explain that, would you?
Yes, it's Antonio's, it's Berman.
No, not that she asked for the 2,000. She asked for.
No, the contract maintenance.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said.
The
playground.
100,000.
Okay.
The
Yeah,
100,000.
yeah, the 100,000, correct. I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought you asked for the 2,000.
That's okay. I would certainly hope Antonio's gets more than 2,000.
I would too, but okay.
That's a lot of. All right, so
All the
the,
negotiation.
yeah, well, contract maintenance, city properties, parks, Antonio's, that's them.
Well, and there are additional, what, Kathy? Run
And
the list
others?
of, excuse me, run the list of the people that are included in that, please.
It's Antonio's, Berman, who treat the dikes, and Weeds.
Weeds Inc.
Weeds Inc. that sprays our, the Phragmites and other weeds.
Thank you. On page 9, right below storm drainage, is that, there's no title on that entry? 420,000?
Road repairs.
Line 7540.
Or no, Kathy, that's the,
That is a new line, and it wouldn't allow me to put the description in until it's actually created in the budget. So that is road repairs, the 420,000 that Bill had discussed
Okay.
earlier.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I know we'll discuss meetings later, but I'm actually for getting back in person whenever the state of emergency is raised. The nonprofits, I'll make a comment toward the end. Transcription services has a pretty significant increase for next year, and that is why.
well, because our clerk's not doing the transcribing anymore.
Okay,
And-
okay,
and
well,
in
yeah,
fact,
because I mean, so,
And we implemented that right around the beginning of the pandemic, if you recall, or the,
yeah, I was just looking at the
Right.
cost for last year, that's
Right.
all, so,
right.
okay. Sorry, I'm flipping through. I made notes on my pages. The porta potty, we're back on page 16. Toward the end, the Battery Park porta potty, we never, I guess, got it in there, and we're gonna get that installed? Or placed, we don't install, but,
Well, again, I think, when we started this, we were kind of going on where we were before with these things. How do we maintain them? What do we have to do? And certainly if council wants us to put back a porta potty, we can do that.
okay. That was down by the fishing pier. By the way, do you have any updates on that?
No.
No, okay,
On the fishing pier?
yeah,
No.
okay.
None since the last time, which is, I believe they're completing a project in Wilmington, I think in the fall, hopefully, is my understanding. And I think they had us next on the
Next.
list.
So
It's
maybe,
But I have nothing, yeah, so I'm still thinking, whatever I told you the last time, which was maybe the year after that, that they might be able to begin construction. I have nothing definitive at this point.
And there is a porta potty at the pier, isn't there?
We budgeted for it, but we didn't put
I
it.
didn't know it's there, I think,
What,
in the parking lot.
oh, maybe we did put one in
My dog uses it all the time.
there. Maybe that's a good reason for us to take it out.
He uses the outside, right?
I have to.
Just see if you're awake, Ms. Carlin. Go ahead, Ms. Leary, continue, please.
Uh, Under revenues, page 20,
Page 20.
yes. Just looking at, taking a look at numbers over the past few years. And I know that we were frugal with our numbers last year because we weren't sure what was going to happen. I think on tax penalties, I think 15,000 anticipated is low, and I certainly think we can raise that up at least to 30, or if not more.
Based on,
Based on the history of the last 5 years, it is there.
but I think the tax penalties have gone down because the city has done a good job at collecting them.
Have they gone down? I look at the last 5 years. The lowest year was 2019.
Yeah, but if you take a look at 2020, they did a real nice job. Does that include foreclosures?
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Does that include sheriff sales? The tax penalties?
Yes. The amount of tax penalties that we're collecting isn't just what the penalties that are posted or accrue in 1 year. We've collected over the last 5 years quite a bit of penalty that had lasted or had been on the books for years. When I first got here, we had almost 400,000 in long overdue penalties that had accumulated. And we have made a push to collect, to send out letters, to go to sheriff's sale, to threaten sheriff sales. So over the last 5 years, we've, depending on how those sheriff sales have gone, we've collected big chunks of penalties that are years old. As of now, Mr. Platt is correct. We don't have that many outstanding penalties to begin with. And the amount that we accrue every month has gone down because I guess word of mouth is we will eventually collect. So we don't have as many penalties accruing than we did for the last 5 years.
So do you have a number of what's accrued thus far?
I don't have it off the top of my head, but I will have it at the month end when I close out May. So I can send you the total amount of outstanding penalty and taxes that the city has. But I believe it's a little over 100,000, but that's with the taxes. That's not all penalty.
Right. So considering that the lowest amount we received in 2019 was just over 26,000, I still think that we can safely up that to around 30.
Well,
My opinion, and especially considering, so.
Another point I will point out that is we have collected the outstanding penalty from those who we can collect from. A lot of the properties that now are still outstanding from many years ago are properties where we don't want to take them to sheriff's sale. The owner cannot be found. They don't have any value. So it's land that we would end up getting.
You don't want the land. When it comes to a point, it's
Right.
really, we have properties where you just go, wait a minute, why do we want to take on this liability?
You may have a property that's been abandoned and our system doesn't even have any activity on it for as far back as our system goes, and they may owe 30,000 in tax penalties. But that's what our auditor considers uncollectible. It still has to be carried on your books because,
So I guess my question then will be is I'd like to find out what's reasonably collectible out of
right,
the 100,000 we're carrying. Like you said, maybe 30,000 of it isn't collectible or whatever, but I'd like to see what that is.
Okay.
I still think we can raise it, maybe not to, it's everybody's opinion here. So, maybe you can't raise it to 30, maybe you can raise it to 20, maybe you can raise it to 25. Okay, so. Property tax transfers, we have a lot of anomalies in there, and some of those are just very surprising when you get them. 200, you could raise it a little bit, but 259's a low year. We've had the last 2 years be really good because of the major sale of the Garrison and some things, so a consideration. Delinquent tax collection, does that fall under tax? Does that fall in line with tax penalties? Does that kind of one as the other? And
no, one is principal. Delinquent tax collection is all taxes that were billed and not paid prior to this current year.
Mhm.
So it's separate from penalties. Penalty is 1.5% per month on the principal.
Okay, so, right there, you can maybe lift it 5,000 too. And there's a reason for my madness. Building hack applications. Again, I think we could probably raise that some from 50,000 because the lowest in 2018 was 80,000. And I see a lot going on around the city. So I think we might be able to raise that some.
May I, and
If I
I'm
could
not,
jump in there,
go ahead, I'm sorry, Mr.
excuse me, Mr. Barthel, that one I'd be extremely careful with because with the cost of lumber and the cost of materials going way up, we're going to probably see a slowdown.
You make a good point. So,
And there are also exemptions for those in the DDD district for not having to pay hack applications and that type of
hack
thing.
fees.
There are hack fees, right?
Do we have people who have taken advantage of that besides the couple obvious ones down here?
I believe a couple have, maybe 2 or 3, but.
Yeah, we probably need better marketing on the DDD stuff to even attract people to the city itself, for whatever there is. Okay. State courts. Again, I guess that's going to depend on what happens at the end of the month with these bills. I mean, our officers aren't going to really want to pull people over too much if for things, if they're going to be liable for everything. Towing and storage fees went up to 10,000. What's in storage?
Towing,
Huh?
the towing, we put the towing up. We were having issues with the towing company that we were using, and we switched towing companies, and we believe we're going to be getting more revenue.
Ah, okay, very good. That's a good thing. Not to tow, but you answered the question about police pension supplement, and that is all I have. Before I get into nonprofit stuff, I don't know, Joe, do you have questions?
Yes, I have a few.
I was going to let Mr. Smith actually go next,
Oh, okay, go ahead.
please.
Yep.
But Mr. Day, you can go since
I'm
you've
good.
been appointed.
I share many of Valerie's concerns. Okay.
Mr. Day?
Yep. So just on page 1, I anticipate that the budget would take care of the proposed FOP contract. We wouldn't have to revisit the change it because of the new contract.
If I can take that question and we'll hold off until tomorrow afternoon.
Okay.
If we
Okay.
can circle back to that tomorrow.
Yeah, we're having,
okay with you,
obviously,
Mr.
we're in the
Barthel?
middle of obviously, we're in the middle of a contractual negotiation, and I'd really rather not talk about that at this point.
Understand.
We'll
But a
cir-
good
we'll
question,
circle
but a
back
good-
that
but a
tomorrow in
good
executive session.
Yep. Yep, and I only have a few other questions. A lot of them were answered, including the body cams. I know Valerie had brought it up about the property tax transfers. So obviously, in the last 2 years, we are plus 882 in the transfers, which is obviously great. And hopefully it continues this year. But I do agree with being conservative with our numbers. I also see in the, I'm sorry, I'm on page 21, the MSC appropriation. Go ahead.
Mr. Day, I'm sorry not to interrupt you, but just to add to what you're saying, I mean, we had a building sale that sold for $31 million. And then we
And
had
it's just a
other,
big windfall.
right,
Yep.
just so you, right. And I know you get it. I'm simply just adding to that. So everybody
Yep.
can remember, we had, that was.
Yeah, that was an anomaly, a nice one, but an anomaly.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Put us all in a good spot.
Yep.
Mr. Day?
So, and actually, just to expand on that, so, I mean, property transfers obviously are a nice windfall, but if we could see a community like Riverbend being built out for the
Right.
next couple of years, we could also see some additional income for that, which would be really nice. So I wanted to ask about the MSC appropriation. I see that what the actual or the anticipated last year was much larger than the actual. Is that because we're still waiting for a payment?
One more payment.
Okay, that's what I figured.
Yeah.
So I know it was already brought up about, security and everything, but I do believe even if we go back live with live meetings, I don't think the Zoom now is ever going away for the public. So at some point we need to look at presentation equipment wherever we're going to have our meetings. Whether we rent a place with presentation equipment or we put presentation equipment in our meeting room. I do think it's something that we probably got to take a look at. Just to go back on a couple other things, I do agree with what Russ said about planning. And I do think that we need to have a meeting and prioritize what this council wants to do in the future with our funds. And I don't think it's just comp plan issues. I think there's other issues that we may want to take a look at and address too. But I do think we should hold a public forum and get the public input and also obviously the council's ideas so we can develop a list. And then as we get funds in, we can kind of go down the priority list and start knocking some of them out.
And some of that, what's in the planning commission doesn't necessarily even involve funds. It involves who's doing what.
Mhm.
And some of that is, when I was reading over that, some of that is obviously falls under the auspices of MSC and what they are doing. And some of the others is, who's going to oversee Wilmatco right now from council, and who's going to be doing the flood, keeping up on the flood stuff. So who from council is going to be working on these goals? And yes, Bill is right. We've been doing a number of things already. And maybe it's all to a point on some of that. It's just reaffirming who's doing what or who is overseeing or taking care of what. So it's who's doing what and then setting priorities. And funds certainly come into it. I'm definitely not disregarding that, but again, it comes to who's doing what, how, whom, and who's going to do the follow-up and then where we go from there. So.
Yeah, and I looked at it, and out of the implementation, I figured there's like 15 or 16 items that are really oriented that would need funding. I mean, there's a lot of them, like you said, that it's just about, maintaining or appointing somebody. But there is like 15 or 16 that if you're really going to accomplish, then you would have to allocate funding. But obviously, this is a comp plan, and I mean, it isn't like we would expect to get it all done this year. But if at least we have a priority list,
Right.
get some done this year, next year, 3 years from now. So
Yeah, that could be 10 years for a project,
It's a 10-year plan.
Plan.
It's a 10-year plan, that's right.
And-
So,
and you
it
can
could be,
identify in year 5, you need a certain amount of money, so you work toward year 5 to find that money.
No argument there, guys. Let's stay on focus with the budget meeting,
we are
please.
staying on focus.
No, you're not. You're talking about the comp plan. Mr. Barthel, would you like to go over the list of requests for money for nonprofits?
Okay, okay, sure. Okay, as I said, and everybody, I guess, has seen that the request for 38,000, we said 25. We were thinking the flower beautification asked for 15. We allocated 15. Arisafa 15. We allocated 15. The senior center 5. We put in 2,500. The Historical Society 5. We put in 2,500. Goodwill asked for 20. We put in 14,500. And the library asked for 5. We put in 25.
My opinion is
Oh.
that we make up the difference of $13,000 and fund them for what they asked.
We have never done that. I
You
disagree
know
with
what
that.
you've never done? Doesn't mean you can't do it forever. Okay, you don't mean you have to do the same thing forever.
I think we want to stay conservative with our budget.
This $38,000 is such a small fraction of our budget, and all of these people do really good work. And without them, it would be up to us to pick it up. And frankly, I don't think we would pick it up. So it's the Historic Society asks for less. They've been asking 8, 9, 10, and they asked for
We
less.
just gave them 10 6 months ago.
Yeah, that's from last year's budget.
I'm just
Mr.
saying, they
Platt.
got 10 from last month, 6 months ago.
That was from last year's budget.
I
This is for the
understand
new
that.
budget. We delayed giving them that money. We made these
Understood.
people wait 6 months before we gave them their money. That doesn't count.
It's not
towards
their
that
money,
year.
it's the taxpayers' money. Rephrase that. It's not their money, it's the taxpayers' money.
Okay, it's a taxpayer's money. Thank
Okay,
you
and
for
we
that
should
correction.
be diligent with it. And just because we did have a windfall doesn't mean we just go out and spend
We're
it.
talking a difference of $13,000.
To me, that's-
And
to
you're
me,
like,
that's a lot.
like it's something on fire. Amazing.
Is there, in our packets, is there a concise list which says who actually asked for what? Or am I-
Yeah,
Yes,
Ms.
you know that big thick package you got that had all the financials
Yep.
that seemed to
Ms.
be
That was this.
ridiculous? That's what it was.
But
But there's no
But
one
some of
sheet.
them really
There's no cheat
buried
sheet.
their request.
Oh, no, we gave you their actual
You get
request.
everything.
We
Right.
gave
Okay,
them
I
everything.
went through the request. I just wanted to see if there was something concise I could see it in one page, but I understand.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Understand? That's all right.
Mr. Barthel, could you put that together for us? And I mean, because no decision is going to be made tonight because we will have another budget meeting.
Yeah, we can
And
certainly just.
maybe just
send
put
it.
that all together for us.
And I also think that we need to consider the economic development monies for, and I didn't get a chance to go look at the magazine. I can get that to you, but the 4,300 for those ads.
Should we update that ad?
Probably, I don't think it's the same ad every year. I'll have to see what the ad
Who
is.
formulates the ad and who approves it?
I think in the past, I'll have to ask Linda on that, but I think in the past, part of it was NCCP was involved in it. I actually know at one time, many years ago, my son designed it since he's a graphic designer, but it's not the same from what it was years ago,
I
so.
thought they did. I thought the partnership did the one, I think one of the ads you're referring to, they designed, in fact, it may have been both.
They did the AAA ad. I know
Is that
that.
what it was? Okay, that they had designed and the council funded
It
it.
depends on the nature of the other magazine and the nature of the AAA, you're going for tourists. Okay, that's,
Correct.
but if the other magazine is more geared towards people starting businesses here, that's a different focus and a different.
I found it. It's the Greater Wilmington Visitors Guide. I found it. I just had to go.
Tourism.
So yeah, so
They're
you have
both
the
tourism.
AAA and the Greater Wilmington Visitor Guide. So it's not like a magazine that's a month, This is something the Greater Wilmington Visitor Guide puts it out once and it's good for the whole year, and they hand them out everywhere and they go in the rest stops and everywhere else. That's what, sorry. So I think we should add those in as well.
This is not budget, and I don't think it would cost money, but I still just want to sort of file it by title. Some months ago, Linda Bradford and I attended a conference about the downtown development district. and the towns that are making the best use of it have a committee that actively promotes the town. And I think that's something we should look into establishing and appointing people. I have to say, sales is not my forte, so it's probably not a committee for me, but I know we have people who are good at that sort of thing. And to promote with businesses through the Chamber of Commerce, that sort of thing, as well as to potential buyers through real estate agents and that sort of thing. If we want to make use of this, we need to promote it, or people don't know it's here. People in town know about it perhaps, but somebody from outside wouldn't.
Actually, Suzanne, you're right on target with something, another project, but since it's not on the agenda tonight, I won't be bringing it up. It wouldn't cost the town anything, so.
I wasn't trying to start a big discussion, just to throw
No,
it.
I can get it on the next agenda perhaps for June. So the mayor has his hand up.
Mr. Platt, okay.
You're muted.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So, look, I mean, a lot of good ideas. I think it all comes back to, you've got a operating budget. I think the meeting, the way it started and the conversation around, there's really kind of a couple conversations all in one going on here. Having a discussion about some of the comp plan to-dos, which need to be divided out, and progress made on those throughout the years that the plan is alive is an important step. And then there's having a curated discussion about larger goals, be they aspirational or just strategic, but having kind of that session, because then there's a whole different way in which you can look for funding sources from private sources, et cetera. And I think the discussion about the DDD, for example, is a good one. I've had people approach me directly that have their eyes on some properties in the city. And I think there's strategic ways to do that. I would encourage us to think about maybe having conversations with some of the contractors and developers, because that's much more narrowly focused, and they're the ones that are going to make things like that happen. I'm not sure that broad brush strokes work with something like that. It's rare that it happens, but inviting Kurt Foreman into the conversation. Kurt is already familiar with the city. I've had him out twice. He's the state economic development director. Just being on the radar with all the right kinds of people, so you're part of the conversation, is important. We also have to maybe give serious consideration to redrawing the DDD lines. There are very creative ways in which to manage that, in which the DSHA has amended some of those boundaries in other jurisdictions where they've eliminated streets and things that can't obviously be developed. So it adds to your footprint. And there's so they've learned more about this process over the years. And I think we can revisit some of that as well. So thanks very much.
You're muted, Mike.
I didn't want to hear my dog barking. I apologize. I think this is very productive tonight. I think the changes that have to be made, Mr. Berthel and staff, if you could take care of that, maybe we'll schedule a meeting in 2 weeks and go over the nonprofits and take a look at all the grants, reread the grants. We'll all be prepared to discuss it, and we could take a look at it in another 2 weeks. Okay.
Will there be a hearing, the hearing and the second reading of the ordinance in June's meeting?
We'll probably do a special meeting prior to that.
Okay,
So we can do a special meeting prior to that for the second reading, and then we can vote on it at the regular meeting.
right. So it's like, you know, a 6:30 start time for a hearing with a 7 o'clock is the thing. Okay.
Right.
If that's all we have, I make a motion to adjourn unless anyone else has any questions.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye,
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
thank you. Good night.
All right, have a good night.
Aye.
Right.